Hurry it up.
We are talking Monsters of Man. This one is written and directed by Mark Toyer and stars Neal McDonough and Brett Chuter. And this is kind of a return to the science fiction, science on the loose in the jungle type movies that we had off the back of Predator in the kind of the late 80s, early 90s. In fact, I would say this movie is one part Predator, one part Chappie. I'd also compare it to the Mario Van Peebles science fiction robot in the jungle movie Solo, which I actually reviewed on the channel a little while ago. So let's talk about the story. It focuses on an off-book CIA mission, and we have the Neal McDonough's character is kind of a top brass CIA guy, and he has made a deal with this robotics company to test out these robotic soldiers in the field. Now, this is an unsanctioned mission. It's illegal. So what they've decided to do is test out these 4 robotic soldiers in Cambodia to try and take out this kind of local drug running operation where, you know, no one's going to be too worried about kind of the collateral damage. So they test out send in these 4 kind of robotic soldiers with the intention of trying to see how they fare against these local drug runners. However, what they don't anticipate is these robots kind of mixing up with a local village. Also within this local village there happens to be a disgraced kind of Navy SEAL that happens to be living there, and there's also a bunch of Doctors Without Borders who happen to be in the area as well. And all of these people kind of get mixed up in this kind of mission, and the CIA panics and wants to kind of wipe out any trace and kill any witnesses. So what happens is a kind of chase, science versus kind of like, you know, boots on the ground type characters in the jungle. Let's talk about the positives first of all. This being shot in Cambodia, it really looks like fantastic cinematography. I mean, I always think when films do shoot on location like this, it really benefits from some fantastic vistas and, you know, some really nicely composed shots here. So hats off to the cinematography. It's a beautiful looking film. The actual effects, I've got to say, for the most part, 90% of the time, are very impressive, especially for a kind of a lower budgeted movie. The effects generally are achieved by people wearing kind of motion capture suits, and then these kind of the effects of the robots being sort of put over them. And I've got to say though, you know, it looks really good, at least most of the time, and the way that kind of the robots are designed, they kind of seem very functional and less kind of like, oh, let's make him look cool and then think about kind of functionality later. I gotta say they do remind me of the Chappie kind of style robot actually. And they have these sort of jerky movements here as well. There's kind of a wild card element. I've told you about the CIA, and then we have kind of all these kind of innocents that happen to be on the ground. But there's also a kind of wild card in the mix, and I don't want to kind of really spoil that for you. But it makes for an interesting dynamic which may both help and hinder either side depending on the kind of situation. And that to me was probably the most interesting thing in the movie where that was going to go. But I don't want to sort of spoil what that actually is, but it's very interesting. I think there's some greatly choreographed action kind of sequences here where these robots, although they do seem, you know, very kind of, you know, artificial and maybe the kind of the human kind of spirit can overcome it, they do seem genuinely kind of tense situations sometimes, and I enjoyed the kind of the action sequences. And to be fair, it's not just limited to robots. We do have the, you know, these drug runners in the kind of the mix as well. We also have, you know, personnel from the CIA office who kind of are in the area as well. There are a couple of scenes where we have the kind of the robotics companies, kind of like nerdy crew who have designed this software interacting with the CIA. And to be honest with you, I thought those things could have been boring, but I actually have to say I kind of quite like the characters there. And even though, and we spent quite a lot of time with them, and I maybe some people may be put off by that, but I actually still quite enjoyed those scenes and the kind of the sense of tension that these guys are, you know, in way over their head and kind of a panicking. And I did enjoy those kind of scenes for a different kind of sense of drama than we had more on the action kind of orientated stuff on the ground. I also quite like the fact that it's a kind of a not clear cut who's going to make it out, if anyone. And I think that the way they've done it is little less predictable than you may think. What don't I think works? I think the biggest thing here, this movie is way too long. This movie didn't need to be 2 hours 10 minutes long. It really didn't. And you do feel there's whole chunks that could have lifted out to have it a more punchy film. I think the quality of the film is good, but there are scenes where you felt like it was dragging. It was going on for a little bit too long. And there's certain kind of detours that you could have completely kind of cut out. I don't really know why. I think maybe the director, because we have a kind of a writer-director, one person in charge here, I think if I had to make a guess, he doesn't want to cut out his work. You know, he's filmed all this, he's made all this, and is reluctant to kind of cut back on scenes that he's worked on. And this is where a producer's role is important, because this is the person who then has to push back against the director and say, we have to think about this kind of more commercially. You know, if this was a cinema movie, you get less runtimes, things like this. But the problem is the movie, you know, it got to the kind of the hour and a half mark, and I thought this film doesn't feel like it's ending anytime soon, and it wasn't. But I do think it could have been, maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be 90 minutes like every kind of, you know, cookie cutter action film. But I think, you know, 2 hours 10 minutes was a little long, and it just didn't need to be. There's just not enough story here to kind of really warrant that. What we do have on screen is well made, but it just drags a little bit. There's also, considering I think this movie does have some intelligence in regards to the way it's thought out, I think the performances are all good, things like that, but then occasionally it will have this like very dumb decision. And I'll just give you one example. We have a scene where a robot gets sort of caught in a crevasse. It's just going to get stuck between these two rocks. And it kind of drops its gun, which is sort of out of reach of it. And our protagonists have to kind of like climb around it. Yet they don't take the gun. And also they don't try and maybe put more rocks on top of this kind of robot or try and take it out or anything like that. They just kind of like go past it and say, oh, it'll be out soon. And then completely leave it. That to me was just a kind of like, oh, you know, we want to have this robot in place till later on, so we'll kind of just skip past that. And sometimes, you know, films are guilty of making these kind of like dumb in-story decisions purely because it doesn't suit the story that the kind of the filmmakers kind of want to tell. But I think this day and age, it kind of stands out a little bit. I think maybe in the past you could have got away with having these kind of sillier decisions, but I don't think so. Acting-wise, I think actually people do the you know, there is a decent amount of good acting here. Neal McDonough is great. I really like the kind of our sort of CIA henchmen, and their kind of, he's in charge of these kind of three nerdy kind of like computer guys. I love the acting from all those guys. I think some of the kind of the characters on the ground, some of the kind of the doctors, for example, not quite as strong. Some were okay, but there are some ones here that I felt were not bad, but not quite as strong as some of the other acting on display. Overall, though, I enjoyed this film a lot. I think it was very watchable. Despite its long running time, I wasn't bored in this movie. I was entertained the whole way through. I do think the running time may hurt it, to be honest. But overall, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. If it was shorter, I would give it an 8 out of 10. But as it is, a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.